Hello, Michael.
Hi, Ren.
You told me that you use sometimes guided imagery for your work, your philosophical work with groups, right? Can you tell me a little bit more about it? How do you use it and for what purpose?
Well, I do guided imagery since several years now, and I'm trained mainly in one method, the so-called Trilogos method, which was developed by a lady called Linda Röttlisberger in Switzerland. She has her own institute, and her method mainly focuses on personality development. The method is based on practical philosophy and spiritual psychology, which of course includes the guided imagery part also includes certain, you could call it even meditative elements. So what is guided imagery? Guided imagery means that a facilitator is guiding the group in what they imagine. For example, the facilitator guides the group in their imagination on a walk over, let's say, a field, and on the way across the field they find something. They would find a gift like a golden ring, or let's say a plastic box, maybe a red little car, whatever it is. After that imagery, the question is, what could that gift that you found on the way of the imagery have to do with you in your everyday life? The whole group, let's say you, Ran, would have a golden ring, you found a golden ring, and then I would ask the group, okay, what kind of associations and ideas do you have on a golden ring? And there would be different associations, like on the color of gold, on the ring, and so on. And then we see whether these associations can be referred to your everyday life and whether they make sense there. It's not about to find out the right interpretation. There can be several. The question rather is, which of these interpretations feel right to you? Okay, and in many cases, there are references, and the image or the symbol that you found makes sense. To give a very short example from my experience, once there was a person, the imagery was about being on an island, finding a treasure chest, and one person found the treasure chest, opened it, and there was nothing in it. Everybody else had something in the treasure chest, but that person didn't find anything. So the person was pretty much disappointed. But then in the group, in the exchange circle, as I also call it, it turned out that finding nothing can also mean emptiness, nothingness. And that person was actually missing emptiness, free or open space in his everyday life, because he had a lot of stress, a lot of work. And so in that way, you can see that even finding nothing can make sense in relation to your everyday life. So that is the procedure of the imagery, of guided imagery. The next question is, where do these images come from? And the psychologists or psychotherapists would probably say from the unconscious. I would suggest that a different concept, the concept of the inner voice of Socrates, the daimon, saying, okay, maybe there is something within us that give us direction in our everyday life, that give us orientation on existential questions. This is, of course, a concept, and this concept can be put under investigation or into question. I don't say that it has to be a true concept, but I think that it is a way of how to use guided imagery in philosophical practice and to rethink this concept of the inner voice that was introduced by Socrates about our capabilities or skills like intuition, imagination, but also trust, because when you start to trust these inner perceptions, these inner impressions and sensations, you gain trust in general. So you have something to trust in, and with that, you also get the feeling, very often the participants get the feeling that they're in contact with something that feels or appears to be bigger than themselves. I don't say this has to be God or this has to be in psychology is often called the self. This is up to each person how to define that, but it's more the experience to be connected with something bigger, with something that goes beyond that person. In psychology, this is called transpersonal experiences. The question for me as a philosophical practitioner is, what can you do with that transpersonal experiences? Because you can't deny that you have these kind of experiences of being connected with something bigger than yourself. The question is, what can you do with that? And not so much are they true or not, or to give proof that there is something bigger. The question is what to do with that. And I think that the concept of the inner voice, where you use these kind of inner experiences, is a way of using these experiences as a resource to cope with everyday life situations. I'm not sure whether I kind of tried to, whether I managed to show how guided imagery, as I use it, works in relation to these transpersonal experiences. But what I try to say is that it's very interesting, in my opinion, for philosophical practice to offer these kind of methods and approaches to let your participants experience something, and out of that experiences you start to philosophize.
Okay, so in a way, one can contrast your method here, or your approach, with those philosophical practices that do not try to enter a specific experience or a specific inner voice or inner position. Can you give an example of what you can do with those inner voices, the voice of the daemon? Let's say that you did a guided imagery in a workshop, and what is the philosophical work more specifically, if you can describe, with expressions of this inner voice?
I would like to stay with that example that I brought up before, with that person finding nothing in the treasure chest. The person was realizing something about his everyday life. And I think that insight has something to do with self-reflection and with self-insight. And there is this quote of Socrates, which is pretty well known, know thyself. So what Socrates meant with that was actually not so much to see who you are in relation to others, but more going into this dialogue with yourself and figuring out what kind of character, what kind of identity, maybe identity is better, what kind of identity do you have, and what dimensions in your identity are part of yourself. And I think also here that inner voice, these inner experiences, are obviously a part of yourself. So I think that this is the philosophical approach in that guided imageries, to do this kind of self-reflection, this kind of existential self-reflection. I'm not sure whether it is a full answer on your question.
Yeah.
But what I want to add is that this also has, of course, you could also say a spiritual dimension, because with that kind of work, in the beginning I said it's almost like a little meditation that you do. With that kind of work, you can enter certain dimensions of yourself, which have definitely little to do with how you experience yourself in your everyday life. Nevertheless, you experience certain dimensions of yourself, where you feel this connectedness, for example, which feel, like some would call it transpersonal, others divine, others spiritual, whatever you call them. But you come in contact with certain dimensions of yourself, which are, of course, also part of yourself. And I think these dimensions have always been a fundamental element in philosophy, especially in Greek philosophy. And I miss that a bit in philosophical practice today, the spiritual element. And I definitely want to differ it from esoteric approaches. I want to say philosophical practice can give the chance to approach certain spiritual experiences without the need of introducing a certain dogma. What that experience actually means. Because what it means is up to each person, to each guest in a philosophical practice. So yeah, this is what I'm interested in.
Very interesting. One last question. What is usually the effect of this approach on the people that you talk with, on your participants?
Mm-hmm. The effect when people are doing that over a long run or over a longer period of time is that they do an existential self-reflection where certain, I would say, either character traits or reappearing issues would become more and more visible on the one hand. On the other hand, the people are also figuring out not only new perspectives, but kind of new approaches of how to deal with that issues or how to further develop certain character traits. How does that work? I think it works mainly by discovering this, as I call it, other practitioners would call it differently, but as I call it, by experiencing that inner voice, you get more and more trust in your inner experiences and inner perceptions. And out of that trust, you kind of change and transform your attitude. And I think by means of that changed or transformed attitude, you have a different attitudes towards life, which is more characterized by trust. And of course, if you're a person who has trust in life, you're a different person as if your attitude would be characterized by anxiety. I mean, that is obvious. So I think that is the main difference, the main change and maybe it is a good point here to end with a question. What does trust mean in our lives, actually? What does trust do?
But this is a transformational kind of work. What you're
Yes, it is. That's what it is. And I think that many people are coming into philosophical practice, not only for counseling, also like with group work, where you have this community of inquiry and you investigate a certain topic. I think that in the end, if you're really interested in philosophy, then you're interested because you want to transform. Transforming what? Maybe I'm not wrong to say it is about gaining or generating wisdom, practical wisdom, phronesis. This can be one aspect of that transformation.
Well, that's a wonderful wonderful goal to aim at. And thank you for sharing your approach towards this goal.
Thank you very much for being invited for this interview.